Hey guys, how's it going? It's X666X Iron Maiden. Today, to start off our history day, we'll be checking out OverSimplified's Football War, Mini Wars number 2. Alright, so, by football, we mean soccer, first of all, to clarify, but, because I know I do have a decent amount of North American viewers, so I have to specify when I say football. And I guess this is supposed to cover football war that when I saw the video and I added it to the list, it's because I was like, okay, I don't know anything about this. I do enjoy football, soccer, quite a lot. So I want to know what this is about, so we're going to check it out today. Let's jump in.
Quick. You have 2 seconds to name these 2 countries. You're wrong, unless you got it right. Then good job. They are, of course, Honduras and El Salvador. One thing these 2 countries have in common is being fanatic about football. Or if you're a freedom-loving patriot, soccer. But do they love it so much they would go to war over it? You bet they would, and that is no bueno. If you look at these 2 countries, you might notice one major difference, and that is that this one is a lot bigger than this one. However, this one had a larger population than this one, made up mostly of farmers, and there wasn't enough land for them to live and work on. So they started moving from El Salvador to Honduras in search of land, and by the 1960s, a huge number of illegal immigrants had crossed over the border from El Salvador. Meanwhile, in Honduras, it's 1963, and this guy has just staged a military coup to prevent the rise of communism, and is now the military leader of the country. He immediately began harassing the peasants' unions and other left-wing groups, but he's a little insecure about the legitimacy of his leadership. So he holds an election and wins, but then the opposing party says, hey man, that election was clearly corrupt and fraudulent, and also you've been bribed by the rich American banana companies who are taking all of our bananas tax-free, and now our economy is in ruins, and everyone started to get mad at him. Now if you ever find yourself the barely legitimate military leader of a corrupt Central American country, and you start getting into hot water, here's a bit of advice that has been tried and tested throughout the centuries. Blame something else. So he blamed the Salvadoran immigrants for stealing all the land and all the jobs and ruining Honduras. The immigrants found themselves under attack by the hostile locals. Egged on by the rich American banana companies who wanted all the bananas to themselves, the Honduran government began evicting Salvadoran immigrants who had been living on the land for generations and started sending them back to El Salvador. The Salvadoran elite were furious and protested, citing moral reasons, but in reality, they were just getting a little too crowded. So tensions were about as high as they could be, but then... It's the 1970 World Cup qualifiers, and both countries finished top of their qualifying table, so it was now time for them to play against each other in a series of matches. The first match took place in Honduras. The night before the game, Hondurans gathered outside the Salvadoran team's hotel, making noise and taunting them. The next day, Honduras defeated the exhausted Salvadorans with a late 90th minute goal. After the match, a young Salvadoran fan, unable to bear her country's defeat, shot herself. Disturbingly, the Salvadoran government glorified the incident and made her into a national hero, and at the next game, fans brought pictures of her to the stadium. Emotions were running high as the next match took place in El Salvador, and this time the tables were turned. The Hondurans had to endure a sleepless night in their hotel, and the next day, before the match started, instead of the Honduran flag, the Salvadorans raised a dirty rag. So great job at reducing tensions. El Salvador won decisively over the exhausted Hondurans. While spectators battled in the stands, Team Honduras fled home in a bulletproof bus with rocks being thrown at them, and the Honduran coach reportedly told his players that they were lucky they lost. In response to the defeat, Hondurans began terrorizing the Salvadoran settlers even more, in some cases reportedly throwing them off their land and burning down their homes, and the immigrants began fleeing back to El Salvador. The final game in Mexico would decide who went to the World Cup. It was close, but El Salvador came out victorious, knocking Honduras out of the tournament. The atmosphere was riotous, literally, and back in Honduras, attacks on the Salvadoran immigrants further increased. This was too much for El Salvador to bear. With its people under attack and an unmanageable refugee crisis on its hands, El Salvador severed all diplomatic ties with Honduras and declared war. The Football War is also known as the 100 Hours War, because that's how long it lasted, making it one of the shortest wars in history. El Salvador started by carrying out air raids on strategic locations within Honduras, including Toncontin International Airport, which prevented the Honduran Air Force from getting into the sky. Then, with their superior army, they began an invasion along 2 major roads, complete with light tanks and infantry. Their advance was rapid, and they were quickly approaching the Honduran capital. Then the Organization of American States met in a bit of a panic and unanimously agreed that war between El Salvador and Honduras was a bad thing and probably shouldn't continue. So they went to El Salvador and said, "Can you please stop invading?" And El Salvador declared, "Not until they stop being jerks," and so the war went on.
Huh.
The Honduran Air Force finally got into the sky, and with aid from neighboring Nicaragua, they successfully carried out air raids on Salvadoran air bases and oil facilities, crippling the Salvadoran supply line and stopping their advance dead. Caught in a bit of a stalemate, the situation was no longer advantageous to El Salvador, so when the Organization of American States once again asked them to stop and agreed to ensure the safety of the Salvadoran immigrants, El Salvador relented, and a ceasefire was organized on the 18th of July. Then the OAS said, "Can you now please withdraw your troops from Honduras? No, please, no, please, no, please, no. Do it or we'll sanction you." You know what? Just for you, I'll do it. So El Salvador pulled its troops out of Honduras on the 2nd of August, and with casualties in the thousands, the war was over.
Wow.
The economies
Did not
of
know
both
that at
nations
all.
were damaged by the war, and El Salvador didn't have the capability to take care of all the returning immigrants, a crisis that eventually helped cause a civil war. The war left behind land and border disputes, some of which are still a cause of tension to this day. El Salvador went on to play in the World Cup, but lost every match they played and didn't make it past the group stage. So in the end, nobody achieved anything, and there were no winners. Except for this guy.
Wow. Alright. I had no idea about this war whatsoever. I had no idea between the tension in the two countries. It's just one of those parts of history I had no idea about. And all over, it made it sound like it was going to be about football. Obviously, from what you got here, it was over something else. But football definitely escalated, and that just is a good example of how sports are taken so seriously sometimes, like over the top seriously. And that can be a whole other debate on its own about how much people are being paid to play sports nowadays. Is ridiculous for just being able to play a sport when there's more important jobs that get paid almost nothing, like teachers or police officers, fire department, all that. You can go through all that stuff. Key elements of society nowadays just don't get paid anything, but someone who plays sports gets paid $300,000 a game or something like that. Some people millions a game. And it just shows the seriousness of sports. And here it happened again. They're already basically at war with each other. They hate each other, and they really showed how sports can push something over like that. You just go at each other, go to war, and then have the shortest war ever, apparently. I'm also going to assume that there's probably still tension from this. It didn't really go into today on how it was, but I'm going to assume that tension's probably never really gone away. It just seems like they hate each other to me. So anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed checking out this tiny little bit of history here. Like, it's really just a short period of time and something random, but I thought it was cool nonetheless. I thought it was going to be more over football than other things, but truthfully it was countries hating each other for other reasons, like as usual. So if you guys enjoyed, make sure you hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to see more from me. I'm also on Patreon if you'd like to support the channel. And as always, you guys have a good one. I'll catch you later.